Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to another speed paint. Today we're making this on a bit of a time crunch, so the image may look a little bit weird at the end. You'll probably see what I mean when I comment on it later in this video. But I hope you enjoy, and well, we're already getting into it, I suppose. Off the bat today, I want to comment that this is a character that I made up on the fly. I kind of had this idea for an image, and I knew what I wanted to draw, but I didn't know the exact details like hair colour, hairstyle, and various elements of the clothing, but I kind of knew the composition as I'd been sketching and doodling in my main personal sketchbook for boredom reasons really, and I'd come up with this winged composition. Now, the wings did change quite a bit throughout the image. There were multiple stages. At one point the wings were going to come forward and wrap around the character. In another, I was going to extend the canvas and have them on full display. In the end, I decided to keep it quite a portrait image where the wings were implied to be up but not on display. Mainly for time reasons, as this week has been quite hectic and I really wanted to get this image done before I lost motivation for it. There's just been a lot of preparation, a lot of things going on around, so I was like, I want to sit, get this image done, and get something that I was happy with, that I could, that I could share without having to really worry too much about the exact elements in the drawing that would make it like really fancy. At one point I was going to animate some of the feathers falling down around the character, but it might be something that I go back and add in and share on my Instagram rather than putting in this video, since the animation is just a lot of drawing the same thing over and over and over again, because it's something that I'm dabbling with. I'm not by any means good at it. It isn't something that I've put a lot of time into, unlike drawing and illustration. So it is just one of those where anytime I do anything animated, it is just experimenting, playing, and all around having fun with it, much more than doing anything too technical, since it is only something that I use to enhance things. It's never the main focus of my work. But besides that, most of this character, as I said before, was come up with on the spot. So I knew that I wanted them to wear a long dress, mainly to add to the impression of the character and like kind of the overall aesthetic of it. The cloak, I don't think I've even sketched that in yet, but I do later add a cloak to it that I decided, again, aided the character, made it look a bit better. It did mean I had to adjust the hands quite a bit. The hands, as you'll be noticing as a pattern with me, were quite problematic. I should probably spend more time doing studies of them, but really for this one I thought it was quite simple. And then I finished the image and noticed that I put the final hand on backwards. It's a quick fix, but I don't think I show that I fixed it in this. Again, it's probably going to be something that I fix before sharing it on my socials. There is also a bit later where I start plotting out the colours, as again I decided I wanted to do this in a lineless approach. I'm doing that a lot more lately. It used to be that I always did it with the line art first, and then I determined the colour palette and all of that once I'd done the line art. With this one it was very much a lineless approach where I was doing the blocks of colours like I did with the gem image seen previously. I did do the blocks in random colours. That was mainly so I could see what was on what layer and overall get a sense of the shapes more than worrying about colour and all those various elements of the image, which I did go back in later and kind of fix up. You'll actually see it that I do play with the colour palette quite a bit. At one point I think I was going for more of a bluey purple look. Then I decided that I quite liked the more red-pink colour palette that I came up with, simply because I think it added to the character's overall impression more than the colder palette did. And again, with the wings behind them, it made them look a lot more imposing, threatening, and that was more added to with the glare and the more unusual eyes that I decided to add into the picture, which I again came up with just in the moment, and it kind of developed more and more where this character became and took on its own personality and its own impression that as I was drawing, I was like, this feels right for this image, and the character that I'm kind of creating in my head. So this isn't actually based on anything that I like or any TV shows or anything that I can think of off the top of my head, but purely just messing around. It's like at one point I was going to give her white hair, and then in the end I settled for the pink that tied in with the rest of the outfit. These changes were mostly tied to the fact that I wanted it to be quite a strong and imposing figure, and the blue just made it seem quite mournful. Like, it seemed like it was more depressing or more sorrow-filled, and I wanted it to be a bit stronger, a bit more of a presence and that sort of atmosphere around the character compared to the colder palette, which is something I played around with. I did have a minute where I was like, I can use the blue palette, but then I decided in the end that the red would work better, because as I was drawing, I kind of figured that this character went from being more of a floaty figure, because originally it was meant to look as if they were floating, like leaning back with the wings wrapping around them. That's what I'd sketched before I changed that in the earlier stages of the drawing, where it was more they were standing and like standing with their hands together, and more an omen of what was to come. I don't know how well I conveyed that element, but I kind of messed around with the idea of it being this darker presence or something that was a lot more intimidating, with obviously the light behind them and also the unnatural lights around them, which was a bit of a nightmare to shade with. And you'll notice it in the later stages that I kind of just shaded where felt right. I did keep it consistent to the best of my ability, but it was more playing around with the lighting, playing around with the shadows, and doing what fit best to focus in on the character and the unimpressed expression that they had, that made it feel like something that you would not want to see, more like an ill omen. And again, that was with the glare, the unnatural eyes, and really with how unnaturally pale I made them. I was going to play around with like unnatural skin tones, like more purples, blues. I don't think I tried like yellows or oranges, because I think I knew for a fact that wouldn't work. But I knew that because of the environment, I knew that I wanted quite dark wings. So I felt that the skin and character by contrast should have more of a stronger tone to them, stronger colour, stronger environment and impression, and also brighter / paler, mainly to stand against the darker background and the wings. You'll also notice I purposefully left shading the wings right to the very end. This was just because I've never really shaded wings before. It's something that I've played around before in sketches, and I've kind of done mini doodles of winged figures, but I've never fully rendered wings before. It took a few tries and a lot of references to be able to shade them in this image, but that was a battle for the very end of the process. I was not in the mood to mess around with that until it was the very last thing I had to do. You will also notice quite a bit that I do flick through my layers a lot. That's because for this drawing especially, I was having issues being able to clearly tell what was on which layer and what was on the layer below. I especially got confused with like the layers of the eyes and the rest of the image. The only one I could really tell what it was were the wings and the dress, mainly because they were most visible in the mini view. Otherwise I just kept getting so lost. Otherwise, at this point here, I'm kind of jumping around a bit and getting started on the background, working out possible overall effects that I may want to use at the end. Mostly here, looking at things like the glow, the overlay, and kind of working out how I wanted to draw your attention upwards. There's a lot of these debates throughout, and you'll also notice that I do go back and forth, and there's quite a lot of work that I might put in that didn't actually end up being used. This was mainly since I had the flat colours, and I felt like I wanted to do something between that and jumping straight into the shading. Just since I'd been drawing for a while, but I also didn't want to take a break yet, so I was like, I'll do something easier and then get to the main part of the work. It also helped me give a final impression as to where the lighting may come from, and just various elements of the character that I could push through the tone. And yes, I did realise here that I hadn't done the details of the corset yet. Those were purposefully left to be added during the shading phase, once I kind of determined different parts of the piece. At this point, I was still not the most certain on what I would want on there, or if I wanted to leave it plain, patterned, or anything like that. So I felt that I'd leave it plain for now, shade it, and then add all of that later. In the end, it did actually end up being plain. Well, it ended up having like the laces and the ribbing on it, but it didn't end up patterned. And again, I'm just messing around with the background here, just experimenting different options, seeing what I could use, seeing what I liked as well. You may have noticed earlier that I was arguing with the hand quite a bit, and I do leave the hands like this until the end of it, but that is something that I will need to go back and fix before posting the image to the socials. I don't think I'll film it because it's going to be a 5-second job, so I'm probably going to end up doing that when I pick up my tablet and start a different drawing or work on a different one, because I've got quite a few going on right now. Here, I know it might look a bit weird adding the red to the thing, to the paler background, and I do change it later. I was having a moment debating what I would want for the shading of the face, and I again don't know why I started painting the lips so early, when I think here I paint over them, because the lipstick and all of that would be one of the more later details that would be added over top of the shaded background, mainly because it's easier to paint it on top than paint around it. And as you can see here, I was just trying to sculpt the different features of the face with the tone, which is something we did quite a lot in like art courses, so I was kind of applying that to this logic here and working out planes of the face and how the light would interact with it. I did want to see if I had a brush that would blend with it more naturally and that I could kind of use almost in a painterly style, but I might have to look around a bit more for that and work out the different settings on the brush. So I just did my usual of blending that out and then working back into it over top with the various brushes, which is a process I know, it's a process I like. Why change something that works? Well, unless you find something that works better, I suppose. But yeah, a lot of the shading for the face and, well, over the entire body is basically the same process of going back through it with... It starts off with like the pencil, one of the pencil tools, then I blend it out with one of the painter brushes, and then I go back in with a darker colour with the pencil, and just kind of rotate between that, adding little marks, adding little details, and kind of working out how it would shape and mould the face. And then for personal preference, I always do the lighting after. I feel like it's easier to add the light back into the shadows than add shadows to the light, just because then you can see clearly how the light is interacting with what you've already got. It's also just personal preference. The hands. I laugh a lot myself, but these parts was something that I wasn't too sure of. Hands have always been my nightmare. It's always been the one thing that I struggle with. And as I've been repeatedly saying, I'm aware it's on backwards. It's all I can see. Just looking back at the footage, it's all I can see. Which, still developing. Take it as a lesson, move on. I will stop and fix it, but obviously remember for next time to myself the position of the thumb. It was because as I was using my own hands as a reference, and as I was looking at it, I kept accidentally changing which hand was on top. And then I was looking down at them going, oh, I can see the thumb, forgetting quite easily that I could see the thumb because I was looking down from above. I wasn't looking onto it from the correct angle, which if I had forethought, I would have made note to take a picture of it and then add the details. But hands have always been my number one enemy. It's something that I'm slowly working on. I've just not found the easiest way to go about them yet. I also don't know why it was being so weird when I drew them in initially. I think as well it was just stubbornness, not wanting to go back, redraw the entire hand, do the outline again, and basically start from nothing, which I'm going to have to bite the bullet and accept. You just need to do it. It looks a bit out of place, and when I showed it to my friend, they were like, all I can focus on is the hand, so it's probably also why I'm addressing it so much, which is how it goes. I did have a lot of fun with this one though, going back to the positives of the drawing. I did have a lot of fun working with the different ombre effects, and I was going to experiment with the blending layers, but then I decided it kind of just works better with a watercolour brush blended out and lower opacity, because I did want it to be quite noticeable of that fading. In my mind, I had actually planned to have that fade be a darker tone back to the paler one, but I think the red worked better to tie it in with the rest of the image, and also kind of draw attention again to the red theme with the character, because it tied back to the eyes and also quite notably the cloak. That detail. But yeah, it was something that I had fun with, because it's also something I don't typically tend to use in my work, which I don't know why. It's just usually I colour things flatly and that's that. Looking at some of the work that I've done myself that I haven't recorded as well, a lot of it is just your flat colours and not very many, if any, ombres. Or I plot them in and then I accidentally remove them when I'm shading and when I'm working in the later stages, since as much as I like it, it's a few extra layers that I always seem to forget about, which that's entirely on me. I'm glad this time I was able to remember so many. I do think you lose some of the element on the cloak in the later stages. I don't quite know how that happened, but I think there might be... It's like less noticeable or something, since, again, when I put the cloak, the tones back in, I think I overcast it with the red, and then I didn't work back into it with the lighter orange. But as you can see, the shading is a lot the same process, just going back in with the darker colours and the lighting and playing about quite a bit with what works. It is a lot of back and forth, but it's also just realising when something isn't working and when something does work, or the joys debates. There's definitely been more than one time that I've been drawing and I've been shading the same thing over and over because it's just being picky or not looking quite right. This one was a lot of fun to work on. It was again something less planned, something less thought through. Like the image of Gem, I had quite a lot of ideas for it. I knew what I wanted to do going into it, and there wasn't very many surprises in the process. maybe other than picking the lighter palette over than the one I had in mind. With this one, I had a lot of fun coming up with it on the spot, basically being like, this feels right, and creating the character as I go, rather than going, okay, this is the character I have in mind, this is what it is, this is what I'm trying to convey. It was very much more, this character has a mind of its own and I'm just communicating that. It was also a lot more fun since I've got quite a few other drawings going on that were very refined, very specifically done to fit certain needs or wants. Oh, I did work the orange back in. I'm doing this voiceover whilst I'm watching the footage back, so I kind of have a reference point for what I'm talking about. But, no, she was very fun to work with. Definitely went through multiple phases, as I mentioned previously, with the being, with the intentions varying from the colder palette to the warmer palette, and I had fun with it. I especially like her eyes. It's very rare that I do characters that have different eyes than human ones. The most I tend to do would be fill them in a solid tone, or altering, so it's like they've got the whites of the eyes are black, or changing different things like that. It's rare that I fully change the shape of the iris, the eye colour, and remove the pupil. Usually it's one or the other. This one had a lot of fun with it, and I'll admit, I know people typically won't notice the small details to the face, but those are purely there for me, and I love that so much. Her hair was a lot of fun to work on as well, once I decided on the flyaways and the various elements to it. And again, it's the same process as usual, where blotting out the shadows, blotting out the lights, and then going back into it with the same pencil tool to kind of give the impression of strands without having to sit there and meticulously draw every single strand. Because I feel it looks better when you give the impression of it. If you draw every single strand, then it just gets way too detailed and visually confusing. Since this as well gives you a better sense of what there is, and not necessarily focusing on it needs to be completely realistic, completely accurate, since it takes away from the rest of the drawing. And I like to feature it as an element of it, rather than a clear focus. Initially I was going to tie the hair up or add some sort of element to it. Don't think that was included in this video, but I definitely had multiple debates as to whether I should put in a bun, maybe have it in a ponytail, or some sort of accent or decoration to it, like maybe having a side plait that went back into a half up, half down style, so I still had the flow. At one point I was going to cut it into a bob, at one point I was going to have it trailed down so it would sit towards the lower waist. And the debates of the wings begin. This is where I was glad that I was doing it digitally, so I could mess about consistently, mess up and just debate how I was going to do it. Since I didn't want to draw every single feather, much for similar reasons like the hair, and I also didn't want to take away from what I'd already done by making the wings super detailed. This is also where I took a moment to gather so many references and kind of sketch it out a bit better than I initially had. And I will admit, later on you'll notice I use the tools of digital to my advantage, and I did copy one wing over to the other, simply for time saving, and also because this was a drawing purely for me. I didn't quite mind it, as I was quite happy with how they came out, especially for the first time trying to draw wings digitally. Which, it also encouraged me to do some, kind of encouraged me to work more with the background and have this darkness contrasting the light that further drew attention to the character. I've been using this picture for the past 2 days as one of my screensavers, since my phone screensaver rotates between different pictures I've done, and I've had so much fun whenever it's come up, since it's a conversation piece. It's a conversation, and also it fits in with the rest of them, which I quite enjoy. At this stage I was worried because that top row was starting to look like teeth. I was like starting to have that basic impression of like a tooth, just with the way that I'd plotted it all out before going back through and adding the details. I don't know why it reminded me of teeth, it just had been reminding me of teeth. But anyway, we have a few minutes left here for coming up towards the finishing point, where I was adding a lot of the finishing touches, the multiply layers, the overlays, and all the little special touches that I could add because it was a digital work, and also getting to the stage where it would be copying over that wing, which I think was among the final stages of this image being done, obviously before I go back in and fix the hand. But at this point I also didn't really feel like you could notice too much, which is why I was fine leaving it until I had a bit more time, and also why I was fine starting this video, finishing it off and sharing it before doing that. I know I've repeatedly drawn attention to it, but that's just how I tend to be. And I know I've drawn attention to it going, yeah, it's not the best, it's not really right, and blah, blah, so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, I'm still happy with how the image came out. I wouldn't be sharing it if I wasn't. As I've made clear, this is all my enjoyment, and I've been having fun with the process. So it isn't perfect, it may not be the best piece of art out there, but I've had fun with it, which at the end of the day is what matters to me. But anyway, I hope you'll agree, and I hope you like the final outcome. This was where I noticed that I hadn't done that corset. Otherwise I would have been sitting here as well going, I never finished that, did I? But anyway, I've done that more than once. The amount of times I've forgotten the eyebrows, or just one massive chunk of the image that I've just somehow completely missed. But anyway, as we're coming up to the end, I hope you have enjoyed. I hope you like the final outcome. And thank you for sticking around this long, and thank you for watching. I hope you have an amazing day. I hope you have an amazing week. There may not be a video next week, simply due to personal lives and things that are happening next week. But beyond that, I hope you have a great day. If you've enjoyed it, don't feel shy to drop a like. And yeah, have a great day.